So the second tip tool that we're going to talk about tonight a little bit is actually using the crowd. Anyone watched The Voice or watched American Idol? That's the crowd, right? Those people helping make a decision of that Kelly Clarkson is going to be the next famous person. Anyone used Odesk, Elance, 99 Designs? All of these are tools that essentially use the crowd to help you. So for my company, I don't have a designer. I didn't start with a developer. I actually used people who are kind of in the crowd, these nameless faceless people who can actually help you with your company. So we're going to talk about a little bit of how you do it, and we're going to use, again, another specific example about how we did it and actually picking a logo for this company, getting a logo design and picking it based on a number of tools out there. Again, my first thought was, we're going to actually, so once we picked the name, we thought, well, let's go out and find a designer to actually design a logo. I got my logo for $5. Paid $5. But the trick here is that there's actually tools out there that you can do a lot of things without much money and then test to figure out what are the right ones. So we're going to talk a little bit about how we use the crowd to wind up actually sourcing logos that we could test to pick the right one there. So essentially, the crowd is really using the internet to leverage kind of micro workers on the economy. And so there are tons and tons of tools, and we're going to talk about a few of them. And again, I'll share some resources out there. But I will say, for anyone who's looking to build MVPs and really try and test and validate concepts, do not spend much money. Literally, you're just testing to see if you're right or not. Again, if you would have spent $800 on your logo and then tested it and seen that people didn't like it, you just have wasted $800. So the trick here is actually using limited testing to figure out how you can get to the right place. And so part of the trick here about, again, being an evidence-based entrepreneur is using tools like the crowd and essentially using testing to figure out how to get to the answer. So essentially there's three really great steps that I would talk about in using the crowd. And again, there's all kinds of ways you can use it. You actually saw that the way that we tested our naming before was actually a great use of the crowd. So when Amazon formed its business back in the day, it was trying to do things like actually minor tasks like update the ISBN number on certain books. So they'd take a picture of the back of the book and they want to update it on their site. It turns out that's a real hard thing for computers to solve. And so they were spending all this money, tens and tens of millions of dollars, on actually image recognition for their products. They thought, like, there's got to be a better way. So someone came up with a brilliant idea. What if I paid someone a penny for every time that they could take that picture and actually transcribe it into a text? So they literally built a system that lets people go in there and earn things like a penny, a dollar, a nickel, whatever it is, for doing small little tasks. That's Mechanical Turk. And so that tool that they built literally to be able to do like little recognition is now used for things like surveys, doing things like logos, all kinds of stuff. That same concept about using the internet to actually ask for your questions and get help back. So Mechanical Turk is a very powerful tool. In fact, it's a great way to get surveys done. It's a great way to get things validated. But it was all done because computers weren't smart enough to solve a problem. And so Amazon built a tool using the crowd to solve it. Now, you can pay 10 cents to get things like someone to basically, enter a survey for you online, or $1 for someone to draw something for you, whatever it might be. But it's a great example of the crowd. But in using all of those ones, there's actually three key things that are important. Again, the first step in using the crowd well, which any evidence-based entrepreneur has to use, is you have to plan. You can't just go to the crowd and say, like, hey, can you just make me a logo? You're going to get a crappy logo. As much time as you put in to that planning, you're going to get as much out. So again, the first step in this is always planning, and we'll talk a little bit about how. The second step is actually asking and reaching out to the crowd to do it. And the third step is evaluating. Now again, for those of you how many of you have used a crowd-based service to kind of get anything done? Raise your hand. Yes, no? Okay. I'll tell you, the first time I used it, my results, I was like, I'm never using this thing again. It's terrible, like, this is bad. So what I did is I actually said, like, hey, this wasn't very good, can you do it again? Turned out when I just asked, the crowd was great at actually redoing what I'd asked for the first time before. So again, there's a little bit of a process to it, and this process will help you kind of use this tool. So again, we're starting to build our tool set of ways that you can help build your MVP. So the first one is designing your questions. Now, if you are actually going out to the crowd, this is an important thing to do. And I'll talk a little bit about when we talk about how we designed our logo. We actually went through it twice. We went through the process twice, because the first time we took through a process of like designing and evaluating our logos, they turned out terrible. And we learned why. And the reason is that we actually did not do a great job of planning what we were looking for, designing kind of what we were trying to learn, our design brief we called it, or if you're developing software, laying out your specifications, what you want to do. So spend a lot of time on that front. And really the key thing to say is like a good description is going to be the most important investment you can make in using the crowd. So the first step again is planning and actually spending the time up front to develop what your question is. So how are you going to ask this question so they're going to know the answer? The second one is actually asking. And so turns out if you are looking for pretty much anything these days that's a knowledge-based economy question, you can get it solved. There's resources like Odesk and Elance that provide all kinds of amazing knowledge workers, be it someone who can actually code a website, make an iPhone app, literally do sales calls for you. All kinds of, and this is a true story, I had a team of 25 people in the Philippines who were literally calling small businesses for me in Washington, D.C. Like, that's an example of how the crowd can be put to work. But again, that's a tool like Odesk. 99 Design, Squad Help are tools that can help you design logos. And again, I'll share all of these resources for you guys. And then the other one is Fiverr, Zarly, TaskRabbit, my last company. These are great places for you to get other people to help with microtasks. And we talked about the front, which is Mechanical Turk. Now really, like, the goal here is to enable people or a set of people to be able to help you. And so specifically, you're figuring out who to ask to help you with your problem, and who's best designed to do it. And then the third step is actually to evaluate it. Now again, you're going to ask a number of people to potentially submit logos to a design contest you set up. So let me explain how 99 Designs work. You basically put the specifications, your design brief, what you're looking for, into a contest. And they send it out to thousands of designers. And those designers will look at it and say, I could win $200 if I design the best logo, or $100 or $1,000, whatever it might be. They're going to take your designs and they're going to actually then go back and give you examples of what you could purchase from it. This process of evaluation is understanding you can't just jump into the crowd and say like, hey, why didn't I get what I wanted? It's actually a process like it would be with anyone else. So part of the trick here in using the crowd is actually doing this evaluation process and repeating. So I'm going to talk a little bit about an example about how we used this process and actually picking a logo for the same company, Capital Swift. We didn't go with Lenvice, despite my gut. We actually decided to go with Capital Swift, was what we named it. So this is essentially kind of the status quo on how most people wind up designing a logo. So I've got this friend, I think they took a class once, maybe they can design us a logo, or does anyone in the office know how to use MS Paint? Like, literally I've seen people design on Paint. Or, some of my favorite ones, like, why don't we actually just go hire a designer? And the quote comes back and it's $4,000. Like, oh my God, I can't do it. So what we decided to do is see, how could we wind up getting a logo designed for under $100? That was our goal to ourselves. Is let's pick a logo. Let's actually design a logo. And the idea here was we were going to use the crowd to do this entire thing. And again, the whole reason, this whole experiment here is no different than what you could use if you wanted to get your, an iPhone app designed, or you wanted to get a simple website designed, or whatever it is. I'm just using this as an example to see how you can use kind of the crowd as being an evidence-based entrepreneur. So let's actually talk a little bit about our process, and I'll tell you some of the things that we made mistakes on with Capital Swift. So the first thing that we did is we said, let's do a design brief. And so we took 3 people who were business people, and we wrote up a design brief. So we sent this design brief out to 10 of our friends, promising some beers, and they hated it. And so we thought like, all right, well, let's try again. Let's actually try and do design pillars based on some of their feedback, and they still hated it. They hated it a little bit less. But what we decided to do based on that is actually to send this out to the crowd to see what we could do with basically a design brief and some design pillars. Now, I'll say this here first, is we actually sent the first pass of this out, Design Brief 1.0, out to the crowd, and we sent out crap and we got back crap. So we actually thought like there's got to be a better way, and that's why we started over again. So this process here was actually done by failing once and starting over again. So the lesson is like, take a minute and really spend time getting your design brief or whatever your kind of proposal is done. Yes?
What is a design brief?
Great question. So a design brief is essentially a proposal of what we want someone to create. So it said, we're looking for a logo, and we want someone to design it that has these kind of potential color schemes. It talks about trust. It talks about, we would like to have it be in an image. So it's basically kind of the proposal of what you actually want. So for lack of a better term, it's kind of the RFP, the request for proposal. It's a proposal of what we want someone to create for us. Design pillar is something that, what are the key words and phrases that you want people to assign when they view your logo? So for example, in this case of Capital Swift, trustworthiness was a design pillar. We want someone to design around the pillars trustworthiness, friendliness, and then safety. So those were kind of our design pillars. So again, this process was modified after failing one time. Right after point one, we sent it out there, and the crowd did not like what we sent them. So we started over again at this point. So here's what the tools that we use. So we actually went out to 4 different sites. Squad Help, Design Crowd, 99 Designs, and Fiverr. And so my favorite of all of these is Fiverr. Who here has heard of Fiverr before? Anyone? You've heard of Fiverr? It's a magical place where you can get anything you want done in the world for $5. Like weird things, like you can have someone record a video of them singing happy birthday to a friend dressed as a clown. Like there's all kinds of random things, but people also design sample logos for $5, which is part of the funny story here. So again, we used all of these and we sent our design brief to each of these 4 sites. They all have varying pricing models. Some of them were around $99 for the best logo you chose, down to $5 on Fiverr. My favorite was actually $5 for 6 logo designs on Fiverr. So again, just think those prices in mind. We literally went out, the same test again, and said, let's get as many designs as we can. And so we wound up with around 60 designs from various sources that we had all over the place. So from there, we actually narrowed it down to 5 logos right here. Those are the 5 that came back. And again, they weren't picked based on where they came from or the cost, they were just 5 logos that we designed. Now these were all designed by various different designers, all under the expectation that if we chose their design, we would actually pay them the full bounty, or some of them were paid up front. So the $5 design briefs were actually paid up front. So again, we decided to say, like, let's actually go out and ask our designers, and let's actually ask the crowd what they thought. So after all of that time, what we came up with is, this was the rankings of the design that were done. The whole lesson here is that we didn't hire a designer, we paid $5, like $5 for a logo that we can use and go forward with. So you can see so far, literally with this company, we paid less than $50 to pick our name and have our domain, and we paid $5, I know, I feel like the Subway guy, like $5 logo for the logo right there. And again, all of this is because we use the crowd to do it. That's essentially the 2 tools that I have today. The name doesn't matter to me, nor should it matter to you. The logo doesn't matter to me, nor should it matter to you. The process is what should matter to you. This process is something that you can do things now on using the same process to set pricing. You can use it on setting things like, how do you actually order your products? How do you actually pick photos for your products and all those kind of things? Like, this process here is actually what's important. So whether or not you use this process to really name your company, it doesn't really matter. But pick a company and actually try it. And you'll find, number one, you'll learn like the process is a real pain in the ass the first time you do it, but it gets easier each time. And so I recommend that each of you spend two times doing it. Number one, do the process to pick a name, and the second one, use the process to do a logo.
After you went through the whole process of picking that logo, did you personally like the logo? And if you did or didn't, does it matter?
Great question, number one. So I actually liked the second logo, the one that was the green logo best. But at the end of the day, I decided like it didn't really matter what I thought, because I've realized over enough times that I've made enough decisions that are wrong. I might as well have a reason for making the decision that I did. So kind of my answer back to that is, why did I use the logo that I didn't love and use the logo that the crowd recommended? I wanted an excuse to tell people why this logo was chosen. And so people will often say like, hey, I hate your logo. Like, why don't you guys get a better logo? Like, well, I could say we tested it and this one scored the highest. It's opinion. So basically come with criteria that will test it, and you'll learn things that, what not to do. I thought one of the most important lessons in actually doing the naming thing was, again, we were dead wrong, like the absolute opposite scores of what we thought. Len Weiss, people thought of literally like cigarettes and vices was what they thought of. Like, that's what they associated to it. And it's just like an interesting thing there that you could have gone down that path and spent a bunch of money like on designing, picking a name, buying the logo, all that stuff, and have your, put it out there and it get panned for whatever reason. So I think it's part of this process of actually like getting answers before you actually get it out there. Maybe it's saving embarrassment, I don't know, but whatever it is, it's like ultimately avoiding kind of some of the big things. And I always like to be able to tell people like, you don't like the logo? Well, it turns out like a lot of other people did. So we actually tested it and it turned out that was the right one, including design and such. So
Thank you.
yes.
Can you talk a little bit more about something you hit on earlier, about the fine line you walk in terms of protecting the IP, the intellectual property of your idea versus giving enough information to be able to effectively use the cloud?
So I don't believe in protecting your IP as a thing at this stage. You don't have any IP, actually. All you have is an idea that's probably wrong. So my sense at this stage of the game is you should be as open as possible because you're ultimately at the learning game. So I've actually met people who have intentionally not told anyone about their idea and then launched their company, and someone's like, haven't you heard of this other company that's been doing this for 7 years? Like, why are you competing against them? So my belief anyways in early stage companies is it's not about your idea, it's about essentially your execution on it. And so part of this process is actually that. So one of the things that we learned in doing the naming experiment too was that a couple people actually gave us names of sites that we'd not heard of before, of people doing what we wanted to do. So it was like, opening ourselves up there to like learn was really, really important. So again, I don't mean to be flip. Like, if you have an idea that you really love, like, I understand if you want to be somewhat coy about what you're exactly doing, but I think at the end of the day, if you're not willing to kind of get out there what you're doing in a broad sense, you're never going to learn. Like, again, there is 100 people who had the idea for Facebook. There is 100 people, I heard literally 100 times, or 1,000 times I'd guess, I had the idea for Zarly like 5 years ago, and you didn't do anything with it, so I have the company at the end of the day, right? So I think it's at the end of the day, it's your interest to move fast, and ultimately if you're right or you're wrong, like, just do it quickly, I guess is my suggestion.